Good afternoon. My name is Dedrick Moulton of Man Up Men's Health. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today, our discussion focuses on demystifying domestic violence, moving from bystander to upstander. Our invited guest today is Mr. Shan Foster, the Executive Director of Men Together, of the YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee, and also former basketball player for Vanderbilt University, a superstar of sorts. And lastly, a great friend of mine and of Man Up. Welcome to our discussion, Mr. Foster.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about it.
So let's begin the discussion just simply talking about why is domestic violence important? Is it as significant as other lethal conditions that we see out there or situations?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the statistics are really earth-shattering when you think about what's happening around domestic violence in our country. 1 out of every 4 women experience domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 out of 5 women are sexually assaulted. 1 out of 6 women are raped on college campuses. More than 15 million children in our country witness abuse either in their households or in their communities. And of those 15 million children, the boys are more than twice as likely to repeat that behavior. And the girls are more than twice as likely to be victims. This has no respect of person or community or economic status. We often say that every single one of us, whether we want to believe it or not, every single one of us is connected to at least one woman or girl who is a victim of this kind of violence. And when we talk about domestic violence, oftentimes we're talking about it from the standpoint of women and girls being victims of such abuse, because the data suggests that 90% of the violence that happens to women and girls is perpetuated by men and boys. And likewise, 90% of the violence that happens to men and boys is also perpetuated by other men and boys. Although we do know that domestic violence also happens to those who identify as male as well. Domestic violence happens in same-sex relationships. And so nobody's exempt. And this is an issue that is really a public health issue, a crisis, if you will. We're dealing obviously with the pandemic right now, but we've been dealing with this pandemic of domestic violence from the beginning of time. This goes back history, and when you look at individuals who have experienced domestic violence, it's devastating, not only to them, it's devastating to their family, to their children, to their support system around them. And I was one of those people who I thought, a long time ago that, if you're in an abusive relationship, you don't like how you're being treated, maybe you should just leave. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. But what I didn't know is that every single day in our country, 3 women are killed by an intimate partner. Somebody who says the exact same thing that I say to my wife every day, that I love you. Those murders happen when the victim tries to leave. So you can't just leave just because you want to leave, right? Like, you need a plan. You need a process, you need a safety plan, you need support in place. And so the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee here in this community does a tremendous job providing not only safety and shelter for primarily women and children, but also some men and boys who are leaving domestic violence relationships, but also helping with that crisis counseling, providing the supports and resources needed for people to go from safety also to self-sufficiency.
So Shane, I do want to delve in a little bit more into that, but I'm going to go right ahead and acknowledge my own ignorance when it comes to this topic. Are we talking about just one type of domestic violence? Is it always physical, or are there's other forms, and what does that mean to us?
Domestic violence is not just physical. The overt physical manifestation of violence tends to be the only topic that we talk about. However, domestic violence can be emotional, it can be verbal. It's really about power and control, taking control, trying to take control over another person, trying to scare them, using fear as a weapon, if you will. saying things that are derogatory and demeaning to that individual repetitively, isolating people from their support system, from their family, from their community, um, you know, using threats against not even just that individual person, but using threats against animals, using threats against their property, things of that sort. There's a tremendous resource online. You can look it up. It's called the Power and Control Wheel. I encourage you to look that up because it kind of shows you all the different signs of abuse, all of the different things that happen that are abusive behavior that typically lead to the physical manifestation of domestic violence.
So Shane, let's break this out a little bit. You threw out some amazing numbers that's just startling to me. And so I'm looking at it, and you just presented how common this is. So can you tell me more about who are the abusers and who are these victims? Should we be able to pick them out, or are there some signs that we should be able to just simply tell that, hey, that's an abuser, or hey, that person is right now a victim of it? What do we look at? What are we talking about here?
Well, the reality is that most of the domestic violence that occurs happens behind closed doors. So you're not necessarily always going to see that physical manifestation of domestic violence. And people are smart. They know that, you know, they don't want to be caught in the act. Domestic violence is a crime, and so they know that, and so they're very intentional about even using their language to be abusive. They do that behind closed doors. But there are some signs that kind of let us know that there's the potential for there to be a victim of abuse or a perpetrator of violence. And really and truly what we're looking at is the way that we treat people, the way that we talk and talk amongst each other, even when women and girls are not even present. There's a whole culture that exists that normalizes this kind of behavior, and I'm sure we've all heard about toxic masculinity and things of that nature, but it's in everything that we do. When you think about how individuals are watching movies and TV shows that are objectifying women constantly as if it's normal, you think about the language that you hear in music. It's just normal to call people outside of their names. That's not normal, right? But it's something that has become acceptable over time. Even talking about how sexual encounters with people, you use phrases like hit that and smack that and all that kind of stuff. It's aggressive behavior, right? But it's been normalized in our society such that it allows domestic violence to really hide behind these everyday behaviors that can seemingly be explained off as no big deal. There are statistics that say that those who have witnessed abuse are more than twice as likely to repeat it or become victims, and so that is definitely one of the determining factors. But I'll tell you that there is no perfect science to just be able to point out that person for sure is going to be an abuser or that person for sure will be a victim of abuse. However, what I can tell you is that the absence of intervention, the absence of direct communication and learning and education around how to value and respect women and girls, creating healthy boundaries in relationships, having role models who model healthy manhood and masculinity, having people to really model healthy relationships, talking about these things, learning about these things. For those of you who are in healthy relationships, that shouldn't be something that we hide behind closed doors. We should be talking about that. We should be showing a next generation what it looks like to love and to be loved, to care, to be absorbed in something greater than yourself. But certainly, it's very difficult to pinpoint somebody who's being abusive, but you can pinpoint those behaviors that you see on a regular basis that are demeaning, that are derogatory, that are objectifying, that are disrespectful. I'll never forget the times that I've played ball literally all over the world, and you just see people interacting in their relationship, and guys will grab their significant others, parts in public as if there's nothing wrong with this, right? Like they'll say things that will give you an inclination that, hey, if you're comfortable doing that in public, you're probably doing something a lot worse behind closed doors. But again, in our current society, we turn a blind eye to stuff like that. We don't even, it's become so normal that we don't even stop to feel the sting that says, this is unacceptable, right? And so to the extent that we can, particularly as men, begin to call out those kind of behaviors, to speak to those situations, and really teach people that this is unacceptable, I think that'll go a long way.
So I have another question. I just want to remind our viewers who are watching us through the live stream, please send in your questions. We have a subject matter expert here on this topic, and we love to engage him with your questions. So Shane, you suggested something about healthy relationships, and I'm struck because I guess I'd gotten stuck into the idea that people who were in these abusive relationships were probably in bad relationships, but are you telling me that that's not necessarily the case?
Well, they typically turn bad, but no, most relationships start off really good. Mm-hmm. Even abusive relationships, they start off just like any other relationship where there's love and connectivity and there's flowers and there's hanging out and it's all wonderful, right? And then all of a sudden, things begin to change. And again, there are so many things that happen in a relationship that we kind of just shrug off as no big deal, but it's a sign that this individual might have abusive tendencies. They might have the potential to actually be abusive in the relationship. You know, things like, I remember as a kid growing up, so many people used to say that, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Persistence pays off, right? So if persistence pays off, then if somebody tells you that they don't want to be bothered with you and you just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, then eventually it'll pay off for you. You'll get what you're looking for. Well, that could be abusive behavior, right? Or people who feel like if somebody's blowing up their phone constantly, sending text messages, wondering where they are, and it's under the disguise that, hey, I'm just worried about you. I'm just concerned. I just want you to be okay. I just want you to know I'm concerned about your well-being. That could be abusive behavior. Nobody should be getting 25 text messages in 2 minutes, right? Like, I love my wife to death. Trust me, I love my wife more than anything in the world, but I don't need you blowing up my phone. I'll hit you up when I get a chance to, right? I'm in the middle of doing this right now, so no, I'm not gonna respond right now, right? So it's little things like that, you know, that signify, hey, that this could be a sign of some behavior that I don't want in relationships. But I'll tell you that, particularly in the church, we've glorified marriage and relationships and put it on such a high pedestal that what we've done is created this sense that I should stay in the relationship regardless. That the sanctity of that marriage and that relationship should supersede my everyday experience. So over and over again, you get people in relationships where they see the signs, but my pastor told me to stay. They see the sign. This doesn't feel quite right. This doesn't feel like love, but mom said a bad man is better than no man at all. Or this is what I saw growing up. So if it worked for mom and dad, then maybe it works for me. And we don't leave those relationships after we see signs that it could be potentially abusive. And I think that's really to a detriment. And you see over and over again people who go to their pastors and they go to ministers and they go to deacons and they're looking for help. They're looking for a sign that it's okay for them to leave. But we've protected this sanctity of the relationship so much that we, in turn, have really closed them off from really being able to leave those relationships when they should. And so I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah, you really hit an area that's, I think, is quite interesting to talk about in terms of how the church addresses this. And so what I think I just got from you is there are some cultural, what we consider these cultural norms that may actually impact the safety measures that a person may take. So within the church, in your experience, have you seen churches actually reaching out and trying to gain a better understanding of how to counsel people who are going through that? And is there a move to really integrate into the church? And I'll say, I'm going to go a step further and say the Black church, because I know we have that stronghold as well. Can you expound on that?
Sure, absolutely. I think there's been some concerted efforts to talk about it at a surface level. But the church has really not been very well equipped to handle this kind of abuse, especially prior to the abuse happening. I've talked to faith leaders literally in every denomination across the country, and by and large, everybody says the same thing. We don't have a resource for how to engage with this and be preventative. It doesn't exist. In the event that someone comes to them and they're in a marriage or relationship and there's abuse happening, they will outsource that to therapists, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's typically their only option. We created a curriculum through a Men Together called Amending Through Faith that works with men's ministries in every denomination to really walk through healthy manhood, healthy masculinity, what it looks like to be in a healthy relationship, how to stand up and intervene when you see abusive behavior happening, what that looks like, what kind of verbiage do we need to use, what are the outlets, what does standing up mean in those situations, how do we be a catalyst for change? We walk through that in an 8-week curriculum for Amending Through Faith. But by and large, I'll tell you, I'll just be completely transparent and honest, the church is scared to address this. That's just the reality. The church is scared to address this because now when you start diving deep into this area of relationships, when all of the data suggests that 1 out of 4 women have experienced domestic violence. So you think about our church, Mount Zion, we got 30,000 members. Primarily, the majority of our members are women. So if you take that number, 1 in 4 women experiencing domestic violence, and you divide that by the number of people who are in our congregation, you think about how many people that is who have experienced domestic violence. And the reality is, domestic violence doesn't happen, it's not perpetuated by strangers. These aren't boogeymen. These aren't people jumping out of a bush or people, we don't even have subways here in Nashville, right? Like that's not what this is. These are the people in their life. People that are close to them, people who are supposed to be loving them and caring for them, and it's people in the church who hold positions of power. So whether it's a pastor, it's a minister, it's a deacon, or whoever, usher, you name it, now you're talking about exposing people in the church who we've put on a pedestal. So the church is scared to address this. But I don't want to single out the church because the church isn't the only folks that are scared to address this. Music scared to address this. Prominent communities are scared to address this because, again, we put people up on pedestals as if something that I've begun to call the duality of people, as if it don't apply to them, right? I'll give you an example. So growing up, I grew up and I had a stepfather who was extremely abusive, right? But he was the same person who introduced me to organized sports. He was the same person who would stand outside in the yard with me and shoot hook shots and fadeaway jump shots all day. He was the same person who taught me that you only get one mom. You might, by circumstance, have another dad, but you get one mom. You love your mom. You care for your mom with everything in you. This same individual who added value in my life was the same person who caused the most pain. The duality of people. But we put people on pedestals and we assume that because they got a degree, because they have a certain title, because they have a certain position, because they've made X amount of dollars, that somehow they're not capable of abusing women and girls. They're not capable of being abusive in their relationships, be it same sex or not. And so people in general are scared to really deal with this because what that's going to mean is being really honest about our experience in life, in that people are twofold. People can be great in some areas of their life and also be horrible in others.
So Shane, I'm going to stay in this space for a moment if it's okay with you. My own experience as a kid, I observed domestic violence in our community. And what I observed was that duality that you said, that this great person gets involved in this incident, but the adults just looked away. And so you've hit on this environment, this culture with your own experience. And then you've talked about the church and that experience. And so it appears to me we have a lot of bystanders out there. And I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit more, because we know we have the YWCA that's standing on the Upstander side. How do you see us starting to educate and move people in the direction of being upstanders? You know, the big thing now, you see something, say something, do something. How does it go?
If you see something, say something.
See something, say something. And so how do we do that? And who else, in addition to the YWCA, that are being upstanders?
Yeah. Well, here in Nashville, we have a very unique community because we have so many resources for people who are in abusive or domestic violence relationships. We have the Family Safety Center, Family Justice Center. Our police department has been trained on how to handle domestic violence situations, so people here are having a very different experience when police come to the home than some other cities who don't have those resources and partnerships. Our DA's office is involved directly in that, and so we're getting people the help that they need. However, you know, you're right. There are a lot of people who are bystanders who know that this kind of thing is happening. You'd have to be under a rock to not know that people in our communities are experiencing domestic violence, that everybody's relationship is not all good. I mean, 60% of marriages are ending in divorce, right? Like, we know that there's an issue there, but it's more comfortable. It's easy for us to sit back and say, well, that's not happening. That's not that big of a deal, you know. And especially once you've become a professional in any capacity, you tend to surround yourself with other like-minded people. So it's easy for us to assume that this kind of thing isn't happening in the people's lives that I'm spending time with. But if we're honest about it, we don't ask. We would never go to our brother and say, hey man, have you ever been disrespectful or devalued your spouse in any way, shape, or form? We would never ask that question. We would never go to our brother's spouse and ask, is everything all good? Has everything been okay? Do you need help in any way, shape, or form? Nobody would ever do that. And I'm not suggesting that we should. I'm just pointing out the fact that we make assumptions about the people in our lives' relationships when we don't actually know, right? But what we do know is that we hear language that is degrading and demeaning and devaluing of women. We do know that we see guys primarily cracking jokes about the things that they want to do to women. We do know that pornography is over $1 billion industry, and it ain't just kids watching it. We do know this, right? And it's in that place where we got to go from being bystanders to being upstanders, where we're willing to hold the people in our circles accountable. There are some times where you're going to see something overt happening at a football game, at a bar, at the lunch counter in the office, where you'll have an opportunity to engage if you have a good enough relationship. There's going to be other times where you might actually see violence happening. You may see somebody in a truck at a gas station just completely berating their partner in that space, and you should pick up the phone and call the police. You should go into that establishment and get a supervisor. But more times than not, you're going to be present for those little off beat conversations where women and girls are being objectified. You're going to be there when the movies come on and they're objectifying women, that they're calling women and girls outside of their name, and your son is sitting there watching, and you have an opportunity to let your son know, I know you just heard that, but that ain't cool. That's disrespectful. That's not how young men should act and behave. It's in that space where we, particularly as men, we got to do better. Because we're not going to be there when the overt domestic violence and abuse happens. But we are going to be there when this culture is existing, and it's in that space where when we see something, we got to say something.
So that's quite interesting, because I think as I was listening to what you were saying, it seems like we do need to evaluate the relationships that we have, because you've hit on a lot of big things, and this is common, and this can be deadly. And the comfort.
Well, let me say this too. Then we've been talking about this from the standpoint of women and girls being victims. But if think about it. I'm 6'6". I'm a former professional basketball player, college legend, running my own business, doing all this stuff in community. I know all kinds of people, and people know me. If my wife was at home abusing me, would I feel comfortable coming to any of the men in my life and saying, I'm being abused at home?
Wow.
Like, just think about that. Not whether or not they would receive it or know what to do with it. Just would I feel comfortable sharing? Because in our current society, we've put men on a pedestal, right? And so because we've put men on this pedestal, men aren't supposed to be abused. Men aren't supposed to be weaker or less than or belittled by any. Men are supposed to be able to handle themselves. But I will never forget having a 60-year-old war veteran who served in our military embrace me after an engagement with tears in his eyes and say, Shane, I stayed in an abusive marriage for 7 years where I was being abused by my partner, and the reason I stayed was because I could not bring it within myself to admit to my family and friends that I was being abused.
Wow. Shane, that's a lot. That's a lot. Now, before I ask my next question, I want to make it clear that he's 6'6", I'm 6'4". It's camera tricks that they're playing. So listen, as I think about this, and I think about, there's so many traps. We have this sense of nowhere to go when this is happening. And so there's that challenge of whether you're male or female, you're in this environment where there's nowhere to go. And so I want to take it to this next level of when you have nowhere to go and now you're in a COVID pandemic. What are we seeing happening to families and to victims of abusers? Have you seen a shift in that heighten, or are there more bad outcomes? How are we responding to this sheltering that's still somewhat in place?
Well, I'll tell you, for the last 6 years since I've been with the YWCA, the hardest part of my job have been those days when someone calls and they want to get out of an abusive relationship, and 100% of the shelters are full.
Wow.
And there's nowhere to go.
Wow.
And it would scare you to know how often that happened pre-COVID and how often it's happened now that we've been in COVID. The numbers have gone up. Every domestic violence hotline in the country, in some cases, have doubled the calls that have come in. And there's a shortage of shelters. There's a shortage of places to go. But I also want to draw attention to those who are within the margins of the margins, right? So when you think about the level of access to resources and to support systems, people of color are primarily lacking access. We know this. We've been talking about this for years. That's a known fact. When you start talking about those who identify as LGBTQ+, where do they go? My brothers and sisters and my folks who are really trying to get out of abusive relationships, but culturally, we got folks who are still yelling and screaming about having gender-neutral bathrooms. So when you say, where do people go? When they're just as valuable and just as much of a member of our society, where do we go? As I said before, Nashville has more resources than most. But individuals who are in abusive relationships today, in many cases, drink the Kool-Aid that we as a society have been pushing. That domestic violence doesn't happen in certain neighborhoods. It doesn't happen in certain communities. It doesn't happen at certain schools. It doesn't happen at certain churches. It's propaganda, right? Like this wouldn't happen. This shouldn't be happening. And as a result, when we get into that abusive situation, at that point, we don't have the resources. At that point, we don't have the phone number to the crisis line. We don't know how to get in touch with YWCA. We don't know how to get in touch with the Family Justice Center. And to take it a step further, minority communities have historically had a bad relationship with law enforcement, which means not only do I not have access to help, I'm also not going to call the police. It's a huge problem.
Yes. And so it's fascinating that you say that, because as we think about it, then you're saying that we have access here in Nashville that's better than most. We have resources that are better than most. But it sounds like you're saying we have a population of people who don't feel like that those resources are accessible to them. So once again, we've created another trap that, we want to go to that resource, but it's really not, we don't know if it's safe for us to use that resource. And so that's another challenge that we'll have to talk about. Now, I want to hit a few things that, some questions that we got. Do most batterers simply lose control and these incidents, they don't really know they're doing them? Or are abusers even aware that they are abusers? That they may think, just like you said, in your personal experience, that I'm a good person, but every now and then I do these things. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the head of the abuser. And then we should deal with a little bit more, because you really hit a lot of the things of when that victim is in a space that they don't know where to go.
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is every single human being is one bad decision away from being an abuser. There are no people on earth who abuse is just completely not an option. I mean, think about it. Abuse is how America became America. Like just really, every piece of all that we've come to realize that is America happened because of power and control. So there is not a person here who abuse is just not an option ever. It's about those individuals who have the education, the awareness, the self-awareness, the emotional intelligence to make sure that they make different decisions in certain moments. But the biggest issue there is that for the history of our country, we've made excuses for the bad behavior of others. And on top of that, we as a society has chosen to not believe the stories of victims, which means we've created the space where abusive behavior gets to hide. So when I yell and scream at my partner, now that doesn't make me a bad person. That doesn't make me an abuser. I just lost my temper. Everybody loses their temper, right? Or we were just arguing. Everybody gets in arguments, right? I just lost control for a moment. I'm not that person. You know me. I'm not that kind of person. So give me another chance, right? I'm sure you all remember the incident where Ray Rice punched his fiancée in the elevator. What people don't typically talk about is that for an entire week, all we had was his fiancée's testimony. And what good, well-meaning men said during that week was that, I don't believe Ray Rice would do that. People who had never met Ray Rice a day in their life. People who had no idea what his everyday life was like off the football field. People who had no inclination of what was going on inside their house on a regular basis. With no insight to any of this, good, well-meaning people said, based on his credentials, Ray Rice wouldn't do that. Not realizing that when we verbalize that, we've sent a message to every other potential victim of abuse around us that you wouldn't believe me either. So consequently, our daughters are at home having had this experience and don't feel comfortable telling their family. Our neighbors are sitting at home in abusive relationships right now. And their abusive husband just walks around doing his thing as if it never happened, because we've normalized this to the extent that we make excuses for the bad behavior, and we've told victims, we don't believe you. So there's a lot that we got to change. But it starts with those individuals who are not in abusive relationships raising awareness that this does happen. It's not a bad thing to talk about this at home with your kids and say, you know what, this is something that exists in our society. I want to make sure that you're prepared in the event that this ever happens. That doesn't make you a bad dad or a bad mom. That makes you a great parent. And people can make better decisions when we empower them with the information to do so. But that means we have to open ourselves up to the vulnerability of having the real conversation, because oftentimes that kid is going to come back and ask, well, Dad, have you ever been abusive? And that is what we're afraid of. That is why the church don't want to have the conversation. That is why prominent communities don't want to have the conversation. That is why sexual harassment is prevalent in businesses, and companies don't want to have the conversation, because we don't want to look people in the face and have that conversation. Have you ever done this?
And so, Shane, I think, many people who are in or we're watching these things like the Ray Rice incident. I think Rihanna and Chris Brown went through a cycle of that. And so I think many people are challenged by how much do you invest? And I know this is a tough question. How much do you invest when many times people go back after they've gotten out of the situation, they go back to that environment? What is that makes them go back to that environment when we know that history? And then I'll follow up and let you respond to both these. Can the abuser change? Do we expect them to, after the big apology, do we expect them to change?
So, if I don't answer the second one, remind me because I want to hit on that. So the first question was around individuals who have experienced abuse, but they stay in those relationships. And that goes back to what we were talking about before around the fact that the relationships start out good. The relationships start out amazing. It's that honeymoon phase that we all experience that get us so excited and allow our guards to be let down to where we see the vulnerability of the other person. And when you've experienced that kind of love and you know that that love is there, you know that great person is there, then when the abuse happens, you want the abuse to stop, but you still want this person because it wasn't always bad. And on top of that, when you start talking about marginalized communities, when you look at the prison system and you see overwhelmingly, it's all black and brown folks. And in communities of color, typically women have a deep love and admiration and care for black and brown boys, for black and brown men. So there's a gravitational pull towards, I might be enduring this, but I don't want to see another black man in jail. I don't want to see another black man on the street. I don't want to see another black father not present for their kids. So we stay. Now to the second part of your question. Speaks to redemption. The Bible says that we are to forgive people 7 times 77. Yet even in the church, we've adopted this cancel culture. We've become so okay with canceling people that we've made it difficult for people to even fathom that someone could be abusive and get help. Let me put a pin in that. You also have an entire movement that is centered around ensuring that those who have been abusive, those who have perpetuated such violence, is held accountable by law when doing so. So it becomes counterproductive to also say that people can change. As a result of all of this, we've moved from what is possible to the narrative that we want to push. So I want people to pay for what they did. And because in the justice system today, there are still time and time again, for many different reasons, people who get off, I gotta push that narrative because people need to pay for what they did. And it's difficult for me to hold two truths at once. That it's possible for somebody to change, but they also need to pay for what they did. I believe wholeheartedly that we should believe victims when they share their stories, when they share their lived experiences. I also believe there should be due process. In this movement, it's hard for people, especially individuals who have experienced trauma. And I don't want to make light of this. Individuals who have been held at gunpoint and survived it. Individuals who know people who have been held at gunpoint who didn't survive it, who lost their life to domestic violence. This is not just some cute fight or argument. This is taking people's life. So I understand and have compassion for individuals who say, it's hard for me to hold both truths. That people should be held accountable, but that people can also change. That victims of abuse should be believed. We should also have due process. It's really hard for people.
Yeah. So, Shane, you hit on some of the, you went into that direction of laws. And I'm wondering if, do you think if we change the laws so that the prosecution of the abuser is not really reliant on the victim, but maybe on the state, do you think that'll have an impact? Because you suggested some things about there is some variability in what that response should be. And I'm wondering if the victim, the way I see it, in what you've talked about, the victim is oftentimes in a state of fear and concern that if I don't stay in this relationship, I lose certain things, either my financial security, either my safety from other things, my standard of living that I've gotten accustomed to. So what are your thoughts about the current laws, and if there is a need to push towards change in terms of doing what's best?
Well, I think like with many things, we're at a place right now where we've taken overhauling the whole system off the table. Right, so that's not enough. We're not doing that. We're just not, people are not doing it. They're just not gonna do it, right? So now that that's off the table, we have to find solutions that are within the current system, which means that it's gonna be very difficult because, as you mentioned right now, it is so dependent on the testimony of victims in order to prosecute. We also have a system that in some ways people have used to further oppress people of color. Right?
Right.
We also, at the same time, have a system where your economics could pay for certain acceptances. Right?
Right.
Same system, all these different scenarios. And on top of that, we still have individuals who are victims of abuse who say, I just want the abuse to stop. I don't want them going to jail. I don't want them going away for life. I don't want them going away for years. My son still needs a dad. My daughter still needs a dad. We got to find another solution. And there aren't enough batterer intervention programs, and they're typically not given the resources necessary for them to be highly effective. So when you start talking about actual solutions to the problem, it's difficult because we, the people, have taken certain things off the table. We're just not going to put more resources into batterers intervention than we do to take care of pets. We're not going to do it. We're just not.
Right.
In the nonprofit sector, there's a running joke that says that if you want funding, do something with kids or pets, and you'll get all the money you need. But do something that's impacting adults, it's extremely hard to fundraise for. And the solutions live within the nonprofit sector, which means where there's no money, there's no mission. Thus, the solutions are extremely limited.
Wow. Wow. Well, the next thing that I want to talk about, because you've created a certain sense of anxiety for me. And so Shane, I'm looking at this whole environmental thing, and we look at those people who are in these homes, and we see how difficult it is now. I think you've added a lot of elements to us to understand why people stay for various reasons and why it's so hard to get them out. So go to a passion of mine that you really just alluded to in terms of who's getting funded for what. And that is the impact on children. And so my understanding is about adolescents, teenagers. Are you seeing this domestic violence now working its way into the teenage sectors where not that they're being abused by the parent, but that they are victims of abuse in their relationships, in their intimate relationships with others? Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, 100%. 100%. We've been very fortunate to scale our program of Men Together to 8 other states around the country. And as we go into these communities and speak to school leaders, it's prevalent. Teen dating violence is so prevalent amongst these kids, and it's showing up in different ways, where you may or may not see, again, the physical violence, but in the cyberspace, the inappropriate touching, the isolating, the harassing, all of this is happening with these young people, right? And here's the thing, in most states, we've taken sex education out of schools, right? Because adults are so uncomfortable having real conversations with their kids about sex and anatomy and all this stuff at home. We've gone and voted for this to be out of schools, right? In a space where in church, we only want to talk about abstinence. In schools, we're not talking about sex, protective, prevention, nothing. We're not talking about nothing. And then at home, again, it's too uncomfortable for parents to talk about stuff. They don't want the school teaching it. They definitely ain't talking about it at home themselves, right? So now these kids have no place to actually learn consent, healthy relationships, what's acceptable, what's not, where are the boundaries, where are those guardrails as we engage, where it's perfectly fine for you to find someone attractive, but you don't have to go tell them. And in the event that you tell them, it would be helpful for you to do so in a manner that is respectful. And they get to say they don't like you. And that's not an attack on your manhood and masculinity. Go find somebody else. But we have not been able to equip our kids with all this information. And pornography is a billion-dollar industry. And it's difficult for you to search the internet looking for anything and not have an ad of some sexual content pop up. So now you have young people who, as early as 7 and 8 years old, being exposed to pornography, but not exposed to healthy relationships. Exposed to pornography, but not exposed to consent. So it's no coincidence when they get into school, they're trying things, they're grasping for straws, they got different level expectations, right? And then when that other person actually takes interest into them, their expectations for that level of interest is now what they saw. And I put the onus back on the adults. We got to do better. We got to do better. Yes, that's going to take vulnerability. Yes, that's going to mean we have some uncomfortable conversations. But you tell me, what's more uncomfortable? Your child being a victim of abuse, or you taking the time to have that conversation at home?
Wow. Whew. So Shane, here's the thing. First I want to talk about this thing you just dropped on us, and I think you just slid that under the door on us when you talked about the technological access and how it's now one of the components of domestic violence. Technology as a domestic violence. So now we can't even get away. So even when we see people leaving, I have in my mind that they finally leave, the victim leaves, and there's still potential access through this new technology. So once again, all of these traps that we're seeing. So as we're coming to the close, couple things I want to make sure the folks that are watching this live stream, if there are any questions as we begin to wrap up, for Shan Foster, I want to give you an opportunity because I know some of the great work that you do that really encompasses one of those being an upstander in our young boys. Can you talk about your program? I think is a man together.
Yeah.
Talk about that program and the work that you're doing there.
Well, we started this program out of the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee, and we started with the simple concept of engaging men to end violence against women and girls. And our community has really come alongside us in a major way and allowed us to build a curriculum that is 20 weeks that allows us to teach young boys how to value and respect women and girls. We're in middle schools, high schools. Right now we're piloting some elementary school curriculum so that we can get the message in front of them even sooner. But it is so critical that we do that work, that we teach young boys about healthy manhood and masculinity and challenge this culture that makes people feel it's acceptable for women and girls to be treated as other, to be treated as objects and less than human beings. And so that's what we're doing there, and we're doing that work in 23 schools, impacting more than 650 boys in the Nashville community. And as I stated, we've expanded that to 8 other states, so we're helping other communities. And our goal really is simple. We want to make Nashville the safest city in the world for women and girls. But in order for us to do that, I've realized it takes community, which is why we created this community model, so that adults have a way to plug in, to get the information they need, to be better husbands, to be better spouses, to be better in the business community as we are engaging with a diverse community, even in the workplace. So all of these things become critical and important, and they are part of the Amend Together program. I mentioned before Amending Through Faith, which allows faith communities to engage in this conversation as well in a way that's meaningful, so that we can be prepared to have that conversation at home with our kids and corporately when necessary.
So Shane, are there ways that those who may be out in the listening on the stream can support you in these efforts through volunteering, financial? How can we support you?
Well, where there's no money, there's no mission. So we're always looking for funding. If you go to www.amendtogether.org, you can access all our information there. We're on every social media platform as well, Amend Together. And so please do that. And for individuals who would like to be ambassadors, to be mentors for our young people, to get engaged in our work, we certainly welcome that. Please reach out. We'd love to bridge that gap and to make that relationship there. But reach out. Amend Together is not for any individual, it's for everybody. It's for this entire community. We have people who are ambassadors who help us in so many ways, literally all over this community. And it's important. And I'll say this, when people get engaged with us, what I'm most proud of is that the fact that not only do they have an opportunity to give back and to do something meaningful in the community, but it impacts them at home. It makes them better people. And it's completely changing how they raise their kids, which is the ultimate measure of success for us.
So I'm going to close out and let you give us a little summary, because what I've gotten here, and I just want to encapsulate some of the things that you've dropped on us today. One of the things is you clearly outline for us how important and how common this domestic violence is. You really opened my eyes to how difficult this situation is for women, meaning all of those survivors, to get out of this situation and all of the different things that are affected. You've also hit on this part of how children, if they're being exposed, I think you said something about 2 times, boys are 2 times as likely to become abusers. So that's another biggie for me. And then you talked about some of the impacts, the other effects that that we're seeing in trapping us with the environmental impact and the role that the church has historically played. And I got a feeling we're going to see some different movements, because this is definitely an area that we can try to push forward in our own church, which is very progressive at Mount Zion. So I want you to close this out. Just talk to us a little bit about how can we intervene and share with the audience some of the resources, again, that you've already shared, to be able to get people to help. How can we help? You talked about don't just wait until there's that physical insult, but there are subtleties that may be there. So teach us a little bit about, the intervention process and those resources that may be available, and then we'll close out.
Yeah. I want to finish with 2 things that I think is really, really important. Number one, we must stop judging. We just got to do it. We got to stop judging people. We judge people who are abusers. We judge people who are in abusive relationships. We judge people who are trying to get out. We judge people who are staying in. We got to stop with this judgment. It's that judgment that's keeping people in cycles, keeping families in generational cycles of domestic violence. This is not something that's new that we just started talking about this year. People have been talking about domestic violence for centuries. And we're still at this place where 1 out of 4 women are still experiencing domestic violence. Where 1 out of 6 boys and girls are experiencing sexual abuse. This doesn't have a respect of person. Nobody's exempt. There are people who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are doing all kinds of amazing stuff in their careers, who are victims of domestic violence. So we got to stop with the judgment. And secondly, in the event that you're watching today and you're somebody who you're in an abusive relationship, I want you to know that there's help. There's opportunities for people to get you the resources, to get you the opportunities you need to get out safely. It can be a very scary place. And I want you to know that we here, as I speak for all my colleagues that are here today, we believe you. We believe you. And there's help. You can reach out to the YWCA crisis line. That number is 1-800-334-4628. And I just want to make sure that you know, especially if you're in Nashville, the Family Safety Center is a great resource. If there's some litigation, if you need a lawyer, we have resources that are here in this community that are completely free. There's opportunities, there's places we can go to get help. If you want to get out, there's people that are here to help you.
Wow, thank you so much, Shane, for the time. Listen, our guest, Mr. Shan Foster, you are amazing. You're certainly a rising star for community advocacy. We appreciate you always supporting our mission, and we're certainly there to support your mission as well. This comes to the close of our session here today. Let me just begin by saying, man up, men's health. We define it as being strong, doing something that's difficult. Domestic violence is difficult. but we're standing in the gap, and we've learned from Mr. Foster how to move from being a bystander to an upstander. Let me thank Scarrett Bennett for once again providing an amazing staff and crew to support our mission, to support our efforts. I can't even imagine a better place to do your live streams of podcasts, so please consider them. We hope you enjoyed this session. We look forward to our next monthly session. Thank you.